What is the reason for the season? This time of year, we start to be bombarded with many different messages. We are taught Messiah is the reason for the Christmas season, while at the same time, everywhere we turn, we're also told is about spending lots of money on things. Most people have never been told about their original origins for celebrating during this time of year, although some of them have, and still they know, and they still continue to do it. When most people hear that we do not celebrate Christmas, the response is usually shock and awe. They ask, how can we do that to our children? And I want to respond, well, how can you do that to your children? And you lie to them. And they never see it that way, because that's in fact what they're doing. I do not think there's anything inherently wrong with celebrating the birth of Yeshua, just the customs and time frame that the majority of the world chooses to celebrate it. Celebrations on the 25th of December were happening long before Yeshua was ever born. Saturnalia was the feast dedicated to the Roman god Saturn, established around 220 BC. This feast was originally celebrated on December 17th, but eventually the feast was extended to last an entire week, ending on the 23rd of December. December 25th already hosted two other related festivals, Natalis Solis Invicti, which is the Roman birth of the unconquered sun, and the birthday of Mithra, the Iranian son of righteousness, whose worship was popular with Roman soldiers. The winter solstice, another celebration of the sun, fell just a few days earlier. Seeing that pagans were already exalting deities, church leaders decided to commandeer that date and introduce a new festival. In essence, it was the first mass marketing campaign to try to convert pagans. The idea was if they told them they didn't have to give up their festival, it would be easier to talk them into converting. The problem with that is the scripture tells us that is not what Yahweh wants. Deuteronomy 12, starting in 29, it says, when Yahweh your Elohim does cut off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, guard yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire about the mighty ones, saying, how do these nations serve their mighty ones, and let us do so too. Do not do so to Yahweh your Elohim, for every abomination which Yahweh hates they have done to their mighty ones. He tells us that he does not want us worshiping him the ways the pagans worshipped. In Jeremiah 10, starting in verse 2, it says, thus said Yahweh, do not learn the way of the Gentiles, and do not be awed by the signs of the heavens, for the Gentiles are awed by them. For the prescribed customs of these people are worthless. For one cuts a tree from the forest, work from the hands of a craftsman and with a cutting tool. They adorn it with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers so that it does not topple. I'm sure we all know what that's talking about. It's talking about a Christmas tree. It's clearly described there. During this time of year, the pagans would go out in the forest and cut down a tree and bring it into their homes and decorate it as part of the festival celebrating the rebirth of Nimrod. Yahweh specifically tells us not to do this, yet most believers think that it is now okay, because that's not why they are doing it. That's not what's in their heart. I say it does matter because Yahweh says it matters. In Jeremiah 17:9, it tells us the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? So it doesn't matter what's in your heart. It matters what's in his. I suggest people examine why they are performing the traditions they perform. If their desire is to celebrate or in some way honor the birth of Messiah, they can do it in ways that do not incorporate the customs and rituals the pagans used in their worship. Many biblical scholars agree that Yeshua was born in the September-October time frame. Coincidentally enough, the Feast of Tabernacles falls during this time frame. It is a biblical feast that we are commanded to observe. If you want to honor and celebrate the birth of the Messiah, why not choose to do it during Tabernacles? It's a perfect time for it. Scriptures do not provide an account of the people celebrating in a time and a manner of their choosing, instead of a time and manner of Yahweh's choosing. Scriptures do provide an account of people celebrating in a time and a manner of their choosing, instead of a time and manner of Yahweh's choosing. In Leviticus 10, 1-2, we're told, and Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his fire holder and put fire in it, and put incense on it, and brought strange fire before Yahweh, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from Yahweh and consumed them, and they died before Yahweh. They died because they went in the most set-apart place when and how they wanted to, not when and how Yahweh instructed them to. The first year we did not celebrate Christmas, it felt weird at first. But when it was over, we thought about it and realized that we had a much more enjoyable December. There was no stress over decorating, buying and wrapping presents, and traveling all over the place. The only uncomfortableness was inserted by family that just could not understand why we would not come to their Christmas parties. Not to say that all aspects of Christmas can be avoided. To do that, one would have to basically isolate themselves from the day after Thanksgiving to after New Year's, which now it starts even sooner. They're starting to put out Christmas trees and stuff now. So once again, you don't have to try to avoid everything because you really can't. We just go about our business and do not pay the decorations, music, etc. any mind. I'll listen to the Christian music stations on the way home and the way to work and so forth. But like I said, after Thanksgiving, they pretty much all they play is Christmas music. So then I just tune over to the talk radio where I'll play CDs of messianic type music. So you can't avoid a lot of it. You just have to make the effort and think about how you can do so. Many people do not know that Christmas celebrations were actually illegal in New England in the 17th century and were culturally taboo or rare in former Puritan colonies from the foundation until about the 1850s. The Puritan community found no scriptural justification for celebrating Christmas and associated such celebrations with paganism and idolatry. The earliest years of the Plymouth colony were troubled with non-Puritans attempting to make merry, and Governor William Bradford was forced to reprimand the offenders. Customs of pagan religions are also eagerly engaged in under the guise of celebrating the resurrection of Yeshua. The problem is the same verses apply here like they do Christmas. Ask anyone what an egg-laying rabbit has to do with the resurrection of the Messiah, and no one can come up with anything. A little research will show that the pagans were dying eggs long before the birth of Yeshua. Ham, the son of Noah, had a son named Cush, who married a woman named Sermonette. Remember that Ham was the son that was cursed as a result of his actions when he found Noah naked. Cush and Sermonette then had a son and named him Nimrod. After the death of his father, Nimrod married his own mother and became a powerful king. Nimrod died, and his wife, mother, told the people of Babylon that Nimrod had ascended to the sun and was now called Baal, the sun god. Sermonette claimed that she had immaculately conceived by him and taught that the moon was a goddess that went through a 28-day cycle and ovulated when full, and that she had come down from the moon in a great moon egg that fell into the Euphrates River at sunrise at the time of the first Sunday after the spring equinox. Sermonette became known as Ishtar, or Easter, and her moon egg became known as Ishtar's egg. One of her titles is the Queen of Heaven, and the two of her fertility symbols were the rabbit and the egg. She soon became pregnant and claimed that it was from the rays of the sun god Baal, the ascended Nimrod, that caused her to conceive. Once again, there's nothing wrong with celebrating the resurrection of Yeshua, just in how people choose to celebrate it. Unlike his birth, Scripture is very clear about the time of the year Yeshua died and subsequently rose. He died on Passover and rose 3 days and 3 nights later. If you want to remember, celebrate, and honor Yeshua, celebrate the feast that his Father told us to celebrate and that he himself celebrated. These celebrations of supposed followers was foretold to Ezekiel in chapter 8. Starting in verse 1, it says, "And it came to be in the 6th year in the 6th month, on the 5th of the month, that I sat in my house with the elders of Yehuda, sitting before me, that the hand of the Master Yahweh fell upon me there, and I looked and saw a likeness, like the appearance of fire from his waist, and downward the appearance was like fire, and from his waist and upward an appearance of brightness, like glowing metal. And he stretched out from a hand, the form of a hand, and took me by the lock of my hair, and the Spirit lifted me up between the earth and the heavens, and brought me in visions of Elohim to Jerusalem, to the door of the north gate of the inner court, where the seat of the image of jealousy was, which causes jealousy. And see, the esteem of Elohim of Israel was there, like the vision that I saw in the plain. And he said to me, Son of man, please lift your eyes towards the north. And I lifted my eyes northward. And north of the altar gate I saw the image of jealousy at the entrance. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing? The great abominations which the house of Israel are doing there, driving me away from my set-apart place. And you are to see still greater abominations. Then he brought me to the door of the court, and I looked and saw a hole in the wall. And he said to me, Son of man, please dig into the wall. And when I dug into the wall, I saw a door, and he said to me, Go in and see the evil abominations which they are doing there. And I went in and looked and saw all kinds of creeping creatures, abominable beasts, and all the idols from the house of Israel carved all around the walls. The first of the abominations he was shown was abominable beasts in the temple. Our bodies are now the temple of Yahweh. Could this be a prophecy of believers putting abominable beasts into their body, into the temple? And going back to Ezekiel 8, starting in 11. And facing them stood 70 men of the elders of the house of Israel, and in their midst stood Yaazun, son of Shaphan. Each one had a censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. And he said to me, Son of man, have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel are doing in the dark, each one in the room of his idols? For they say, Yahweh does not see us. Yahweh has forsaken the land. And he said to me, You are to see still greater abominations which they are doing. And he brought me to the door of the north gate of the house of Yahweh. And I saw women there, sitting there, weeping for Tammuz. Now we talk about, remember Sermonette and her immaculate conception? That pregnancy resulted in a son whose name was Tammuz. He was also a mighty hunter like his father Nimrod. When Tammuz was 40 years old, he was hunting in the woods and was killed by a wild boar. That's why it's ham that's traditionally eaten on Easter. After Tammuz died, his mother Sermonette began a custom in Babylon called 40 days of weeping for Tammuz, and that's what the Bible's talking about. So she established a custom, the 40 days of weeping, where people were commanded to fast and pray for Tammuz in the underworld. They exchanged one day of pleasure in this life for each year of Tammuz's life. Today, the Roman Catholic Church has been renamed this as Lent, in which they give up one thing that they like: chocolate, sodas, caffeine, things like that. So once again, it's the Catholic Church instituted that. It wasn't something that had always been around. And this is evidenced by the first century believers did not fast or abstain from pleasure for 40 days, and that the Catholic Church invented Lent. Catholic writings recount teachings of a saint who, writing around the year 190, said, Some think they ought to fast for 1 day, others for 2 days, and others even for several, while others reckon 40 hours of both day and night to their fast. So apparently, in the year 190, Lent was not part of the church, because he knew nothing about any Lent or pre-Easter fast of 40 days, or else he would have mentioned it. And back to Ezekiel 8:15, he said to me, Have you seen this, O Son of Man? You are to see still greater abominations than these. He brought me into the inner court of the house of Yahweh, and there, at the door of Hekel, of Yahweh, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs towards the Hekel of Yahweh and their faces toward the east, and they were bowing themselves to the sun. Ezekiel was shown people turning their back on Yahweh and bowing down to the sun. I'm sure that we have all heard of Easter sunrise services. This is another way the enemy has infiltrated the mainstream church. And back to Ezekiel 8:17. And he said to me, Have you seen, O Son of Man? Is it a small matter to the house of Yehudah that do the abominations which they have done here? For they have filled the land with violence, and turned back to provoke me. And see, they are putting the branch to my nose. Therefore I shall indeed deal in wrath. My eyes shall not pardon, nor would I spare. And they shall cry in my ears with a loud voice, but I shall not hear them. Here he tells us that if we are partaking in these abominations, he will not hear us. Once again, I don't believe there's anything inherently wrong with celebrating the birth and resurrection of Yeshua, just how we celebrate them. Yahweh expects us to behave differently. Leviticus 11:43 and 44 says, Do not make yourselves abominable with any creeping creature that creeps, and do not make yourselves unclean with them, lest you be defiled by them. For I am Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall set yourselves apart, and you shall be set apart, for I am set apart. Yahweh has told us he does not want us to worship in the ways the pagans worship. Once again, Leviticus 18:1. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, I am Yahweh your Elohim. Do not do as they do in the land of Mitzrayim where you dwelt, and do not do as they do in the land of Canaan where I am bringing you, and do not walk in their laws. Do my right rulings and guard my laws to walk in them. I am Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall guard my laws and my right rulings, which a man does and lives by them. I am Yahweh. Once again, Leviticus 18, In 24 it says, "Do not defile yourselves with all these, for by all these the nations are defiled, which I am driving you out before you. Thus the land became defiled, therefore I punished it for its crookedness, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. But you shall guard my laws and my right rulings, and do not do any of these abominations, the native nor the stranger who sojourns among you, because the men of the land who were before you have done all these abominations, and thus the land became defiled. So let not the land vomit you out for defiling it, as it vomited out the nations that were before you. For whoever does any of these abominations, those beings who do them shall be cut off from among their people." Once again it says, "Whoever does any of these abominations, those beings who shall do them shall be cut off from their people. And you shall guard my charge, as you do not do any of the abominable practices which were done before you, so as to not defile yourselves by them. I am Yahweh your Elohim." Once again, Deuteronomy 12:29 through 31. "Do not inquire about mighty ones, saying, how do these nations serve their mighty ones? And let me do so too. Do not do so to Yahweh your Elohim." So what does Yahweh desire of us? Deuteronomy 10:12 to 13 says, "And now, Israel, what is Yahweh your Elohim asking of you? But to fear Yahweh your Elohim, and walk in all his ways, and to love him, and serve Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being, to guard the commands of Yahweh and his laws, which I command today, for your good." So we must ask the question, is this a salvation issue? To that I'll go to Matthew 7:21 and 23. "Not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter to the reign of the heavens, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in the heavens. Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and have done mighty works in your name? Then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness." Yahweh bless.